Hi everyone, welcome to Google Developer Space channel and thank you for joining us today. Super excited to be hosting today's session with Timothy from Singapore University of Technology and Design, also known as SUTD. There are some really exciting projects that these students have been working on, and I'm personally super excited to hear from them as well. Do make use of the live chats to ask questions and let us know where you're tuning in from. Before we begin today's session, let me briefly introduce who we are and what we do. Google Developer Space is a platform for developers and startups around the region to learn, connect, engage, and be inspired. As part of the developer relations team, we aim to empower and connect the community to our people, programs, network, and technologies, be it in person like a couple of months ago or online like today. Without further ado, I'll hand the stage over to Timothy to start today's session. Over to you.
Thanks, Yasin. Thanks for the wonderful introduction. So the title of this session today is Learning by Reflection. Right, so this is actually an offshoot of an event that happened last week in SUTD. Right, so just a short introduction for those who might not be familiar. Right, SUTD is one of Singapore's newest public universities. We are located at Changi, right next to Expo. And every year in SUTD, we have this physical event called LCC, or Learning Celebration Carnival, where our students will come together and basically share their projects and their internship experiences and so on with each other. So it's a tremendous opportunity for students to be able to learn and share from each other about the work that they have done. However, this, of course, is not possible this year because of the current pandemic. So what we did is we did what most other conferences have done. So we've shifted everything online. So for example, this physical poster gallery that you see over here has been moved online. So this year, LCC is basically a fully virtual event, and we maintain pretty much a lot of elements of the previous event, which is physical. So we had our own live streaming of 15 presentations by various students, and we'll upload these videos to our website in the future. Right, so the website is lcc.sutd.edu.sg, and we also have almost 300 posters in our poster gallery. The turnout for our virtual LCC was also pretty good. Right, we have about 1,500 visitors, 8% of which came from international audience. Right, so this is part of our virtual LCC this year, right, this particular session over here. So special thanks to Google DevSpace for hosting this session for us to allow our students to have a better platform to basically share their work with the wider developer community in Singapore. We have 3 interesting talks in this session. Right, the first one will be about sketching with deep neural networks, basically how AI is being used to optimize the design ideation process. The second talk will be on security engineering, building a chatbot to manage Jumpcloud users. And we have a third talk, which is about DevOps and how to manage everything with Ansible, and with special examples from our Google Cloud platform. Throughout each of these talks, feel free to use the live chat to basically ask questions to the speakers. We will have a short Q&A after each talk. Do note that when you ask questions in the live chat, there might be a short delay before we are able to see the questions from our end. So in the event that we do not get to your question in time, we will also have another Q&A session at the very end to address any lingering questions. So thanks everyone for joining us here today. And without further ado, I will be inviting our first speaker, Yi-Heng, to the stage. Right. Hi, Yi-Heng. You may carry on with your presentation.
Hi. So today I'm going to talk about my internship experience that I went through during the summer break. So before I talk about my project, I would like to introduce a bit about myself. I'm Yi-Heng. I'm currently a Term 4 ASD sophomore. So basically, architecture study. I think what I'm sharing now is relevant to my experiences that I went through during this internship. This is a photo of me doing sketching in Bangkok earlier this year. So as you can tell, I'm a avid urban sketcher. I'm an active member of Urban Sketchers Singapore, and I'm a current president of SUTD Sketchers. So how this hobby started was because I was very interested in architecture, and from this hobby, my appreciation of architecture also grew. So here are some of my works that I've done last year. So I actually started urban sketching last year, and I've been doing it at the very least once a week. Yeah. So other than urban sketching, I was also like commissioned by the school to work on some designs for postcards as well. So here are some of my works, and yeah, this is one of my more recent work. This was done 2 weeks ago at around at Tiong Bahru. So why is this relevant? So I wanted to during the summer break, I wanted to work on internship project that was related to architecture. So I contacted the artificial architecture lab in SUTD, which is led by Professor Emmanuel. This lab examines the conceptual and technological shifts in design thinking and practices as induced by state-of-the-art development in both fields of inquiry. The group speculates and reimagines new paradigms of artificial design computation and new modes of augmented human-machine interactions for the built environment. So after looking through my portfolio and my resume, Professor Emmanuel offered me the choice between 2 different projects, both AI related. As a caveat, even though I was introduced to machine learning during a mod last year, I'm still extremely inexperienced about AI. So out of these 2 projects, what was interesting to me the most was AI sketching and what it might entail. So during my first Zoom call, Professor Emmanuel asked me to talk about my urban sketching experiences to try to come up with new directions with AI-generated sketches. Since there are already many AI programs that utilize sketches as a tool, such as deepfake AI that converts sketches into facial profiles, Professor Emmanuel wanted to fuse the idea of AI specifically with urban sketching due to my experience in it. Hence, the question, is it possible to fuse urban sketching and AI to create a useful tool? So as we were brainstorming about the project, he suggested me to take a look at Google Quick Draw for inspiration, as it was an AI trained by sketches as well. So basically, Google Quick Draw is a game that requires the player to sketch based on the word that's given to them. And AI will try to accurately guess the sketch under 20 seconds. And each new sketch, whether or not the AI was able to guess correctly or not, will be added into the training set to train the AI to guess the sketches with more precision. Through analyzing each vector strokes and with interpolation and stroke prediction, the AI makes an appropriate guess of the input. Oh, however, when thinking about urban sketching, we highlighted some features as well as potential issues when using it as a medium for our data set. So the beauty of urban sketching is that there are no 2 sketches that are the same. However, the use of colors, varying line weights, and sizes may introduce too many variables if we were to use it to train an AI. And due to the time constraints, having only 10 weeks to work on this project, we had to take into account how long it would take to complete each individual sketch. And we might not be able to generate a large enough data set to train the AI within the 10 weeks of the internship. So as we were thinking, I came up with the idea that instead of using urban sketching, we can use thumbnail sketches. So what are thumbnail sketches? Thumbnail sketch is basically helps strip a scene down to its basic elements and is used to position key elements into the frame. So this is usually done before you work on the actual sketch so that you can roughly draft out your sketch and plan it out before you work on the actual thing. So the advantages of using this method of sketching is that it's easy to control with simple strokes, limited colors, and it is very quick to work on. Each sketch usually takes less than 5 minutes, as you would expect you would do multiple thumbnail sketches to get the perfect angle you want before start working on an actual sketch itself. And because of how short of a time you take to work on each of these thumbnail sketch, it allows for different interpretations of the space and forms that are found in the sketch. Hence, we thought to create an AI that is able to generate thumbnail sketches based on images provided to the program. So what do I mean? What we came up with was a basic idea of creating an AI program that when you feed in a reference image, will produce a thumbnail sketch for you. So what this achieves is basically we thought of it as a visualization tool to help with design ideation. So when you give a photograph of an architecture structure to the AI, the thumbnail sketch that is provided back to you can be used to for you to interpret however you like, and based on that, it might help with the creative process when thinking about different forms and spaces on the given site. So of course, the two main portions of the project are mainly the data creation and the programming of the AI. And as I have established early on, because I am relatively inexperienced with AI and extremely experienced in urban sketching, I was assigned to focus mainly on data creation. So what does this data creation entail? So basically what I did was I started to choose 4 different planning areas in Singapore. Clementi, Central area, Tampines, as well as Novena, to represent different regions around Singapore. I had to collect a repository of reference images based on these regions, as well as filter usable images to use as reference to do thumbnail sketching. And this is where the thumbnail sketching starts. For each image, I would generate a thumbnail sketch and record the sketching process. The video and the sketches will then be exported before I have to slowly classify each file according to the longitude and latitude values in which the images were collected from. So here are some examples of the sketches versus reference. So for each sketch, I would take at most 3 minutes to complete. This means that I do not have the luxury of adding too many unnecessary details to sketch. So basically, apart from the first week worth of figuring out all the necessary details relating to the project, I spent the rest of the internship sketching as large a dataset as possible. This included editing and exporting the respective process videos for each sketch. So here is an example of a video of a sketch, which was sped up by 10 times. So it would the video length is around 20 seconds, which means that I took roughly 3 minutes to finish this sketch. Yeah. What was I able to achieve? Within the 10 weeks of internship, I was able to complete around 2,200 sketches and around 150 hours worth of video capture. Obviously, I had to do research on AI itself, so I actually gained a better understanding about sketching related AI, and I got to experience the rigor of data collection and creation, especially ensuring that all the parameters were set explicitly before data collection could begin, which was what I did during the first week. So here comes the most interesting portion of my presentation. I will be showing you some of the sketches that were generated by the preliminary model that we have right now. Here are some of the images that Professor Emmanuel sent to me. As due to the time frame that was allowed for, this is still a preliminary model. And even though the original plan was to write an AI program from scratch, these sketches were produced from a model that undergone transfer learning from another pre-trained model, trained with sketches of birds. And the results, as you can see here, make for some very interesting sketches. As a whole, most of the sketches look rather abstract due to their wavy nature, while most building facades look uniform. And it's actually very interesting when we look at each individual sketch in detail. And I'll now pick a few to take a deeper look. So if you take a look at one of these sketches, you can find extreme similarities to my style of sketching. For this sketch on the left, the sketch is almost indistinguishable to what I could have drawn. And the AI was able to pick up some of my habits, including using mid-tones, the gray tones, to represent the road, as well as using black to fill the trees and the foliage. And the interesting thing is that the model that we used, the AI was not provided with any reference images to work on. So these sketches were all generated from scratch, which means that this sketch over here represents a place that does not exist, or like, So here's another sketch. This is a more abstract sketch. And when you look at this sketch, it's not that straightforward. You might be able to visualize different structures based on this image. So as you can see, there's a large space in the foreground, and you might represent it. You might think it might be a town square. It might be like the middle of a hawker center. The poles at the back might be light poles. It might actually look like railings for the streaks of lines that are across the center of the page or of the sketch. And you can see the building at the background, like there might be a building at the background. It might be a shelter. It might be a building with a pitched roof. So a lot of these sketches are actually open for interpretation. Based on this, you can easily see that sketches like this can actually be useful as a primer to further explorations of the space and forms that can be used at a given site. My closing thoughts. So imperfections that stem from my sketching creates opportunities for the AI to generate a form of variation. And the sketches will not be as simple as a one-to-one recreation of the reference, which allows for a more unique interpretation of space and forms based on the AI-generated sketches. And even though I had extremely limited knowledge about AI coming into this internship, I was actually very happy that I was able to work on this project from the ground up. And it managed to achieve rather stunning results in the form of the generated sketches. For this, perhaps, it is because that I am not familiar with the limitations and boundaries of AI, as due to my lack of experience in it, that allowed me to explore AI in this direction. With AI systems being so advanced nowadays, it might be that we are reaching a point where the capabilities of AI are limitless, only bounded by the limitations of our imagination. Perhaps then we will need more creative minds to come up with more innovative ways to take advantage of AI to solve real-world problems. Thank you, and I hope you enjoyed my sharing as much as I enjoyed sharing my experiences with you.
Okay, thanks Yi-Heng for that sharing. It was very interesting. Currently, we do not have any questions in the live chat. So what we'll do is we'll just move on to the next talk first. Right, so let me transition over. Right, so now we would like to welcome Shing to give her talk on security engineering, how to build a Slack bot to manage Jumpcloud users.
Hi guys, I'm Shing, and today I'll be sharing with you my internship at FSMK Funding Societies in the summer of 2020. So I was tasked to build a Slack bot to manage Jumpcloud users as my first project with my team. And I worked on the security team, and this project is about identity access management. So a bit about myself. I'm interested in fintech, blockchain, and DevOps. And in the summer of 2020, my seniors and I received news that the security paper that we were writing, CoinWatch, a clone-based approach for detecting vulnerabilities in cryptocurrencies, was accepted into IEEE Blockchain 2020. So this is a research paper about detecting vulnerable fragments of Bitcoins based on CVEs that were lodged and identifying these vulnerable fragments in coins that have forked from Bitcoin. So to prevent the propagation of vulnerability. I also worked on a contact tracing solution using blockchain for GovTech's COVID-19 idea sprint. Yeah, so information security. Some people would think that, oh, this is practice to become a hacker. And other people will think that, oh, because of the hackers doing their work, then you have to do a lot of overtime. But I think most of the people would know this team as the team that sends out reminders to update your emails every 3 months. My experience is that being in the security engineering team is very much like being a software engineer. So about project origins, as you imagine, the IT team were big advocates for this Slackbot project, as it would help them to navigate Jumpcloud's GUI faster and solve user access issues. So in the background, you can see a part of the documentation for the commands on the Slackbot. So based on the functions that the IT team usually used, we came up with the corresponding command lines for the Slackbot. So some examples of the commands that we usually have include listing users from the system group, resetting multi-factor authentication, as well as binding a system on the company's computer to a user email. So these are some of the basic identity access management functions that you would expect to see in an organization. So Jumpcloud has this flat access control, which means that there is only an admin role and a user role and no in-between roles. So this is a bad design because imagine if you have a system owner who needs elevated privilege in order to grant user access to a third-party application. This system owner would have access to the admin console, which allows him to control other users and applications. So with so many users that have this access to admin console, it is very problematic. For example, if a hacker gains access to any one of these accounts, the hackers will be able to gain control to the admin console, which is something that we want to avoid. So there's high risk associated with such architecture, and instead, let's consider the principle of least privilege. The principle of least privilege is the idea that any user, program, or process should only have the minimum functions, minimum privileges necessary to perform its functions. So here is a chart showing some of the user roles that we have. Only the IT team should be able to have access to devices, reset passwords, and reset multi-factor authentication. And only the system owners should be able to grant access to users to access third-party applications. We should also have a system administrator that will be able to provision user roles to different users. And the principle of this privilege also applies to the system administrator. So if the system administrator would like access to devices, she should also create a new user and provision the IT team this new account in order to gain access to the devices. We are able to define the types of Jumpcloud functions that can be called by the bot, and users using the bot will only be able to access these functions that we have programmed. So this helps us to limit the access privilege that's given to each individual account instead of giving unlimited access to users of the IT team and system owners. So one security feature that we have is access control. The first barrier to entry comes from limited access to the private channel that the Slackbot is part of. We will add the IT team manually into the private Slack channel to ensure that only the relevant users are able to gain access to the bot. We will also do a second check for users who query the database, and if we find out that the user is not in the admin database, we will also prevent the query from taking place. Another important security feature is the audit logs. So the audit logs will give us a chronological log of events, of who did what, so that in the event that an attack takes place, we can be able to trace what actually happened. So there's an audit trail in the Slack channel where every command that the IT team member requests will be logged publicly in this private Slack channel, and the rest of the IT members can check if this request is legitimate. We also have a second audit log in the bots database. So in the event that we need to check further in the past to find out a certain action, we can have a more readable and accessible way to do so instead of scrolling up in the Slack channel. Yeah, so there's a joke here about you can use this to check if your IT team has been assessing user requests. Can check. Yeah, I can check if the IT team has been responsive, but that's a joke. Okay, so some of the benefits of the Slack bot will be to reduce the number of users that have access to the admin console. So we can revoke admin access for IT teams and system owners who were previously admins in order to carry out their roles. Instead, by using the Slack bot, we have the functions that are required for the team, and the Slack bot itself will also have admin console access via a Jumpcloud API key in the manifest file. The Slack bot also simplifies provisioning and deprovisioning of resources. So instead of fiddling with many steps on the GUI, the IT team is able to carry out requests with just one line of command. So for example, previously, if you wanted to list users on system groups, the IT team would have to carry out 4 steps. First, they would have to log into the Jumpcloud. Then they will have to select the system group tab on the left-hand side of the panel. And then they will have to key in the system group name in the search. And then finally, select the correct system group in order to list users. However, with the Slack bot, they only need to enter one line of code in order to get their users. So this will definitely increase the productivity of the IT team, and it's a double win for the IT team and users in the company who like to get their account unlocked. So now on to some of the things that I learned about the internship. When I was accepted into the security team, I thought that it's going to be a red team, blue team, kind of learning about capture the flag. But I realized that it's more than that. There's IAM, DevOps security, the vetting of security threats posed by external vendors, and fixing of vulnerabilities itself. So my sub-team, security engineering, develops internal tools and code to improve the security of day-to-day routines. An example of a project that I worked on would be refactoring key services for when they did a migration from version 1 to version 2 API. So it is important to update code with best coding practices so that there is less chance for security issues to crop up. And also the next developer will have less trouble. So for the project, we use this model view controller pattern where the model controls the data logic portion and the view controls the presented portion, as well as the controller, which is the interface between the model and the view. So an analogy for this would be you at a restaurant. When you come to the restaurant, you tell the waiter what you'd like to eat, and then the waiter will convey your instruction to the chef who cooks. Then the waiter would fetch the food from the chef and then bring it back to you. So in this case, you would be the view, the model would be the chef, and the controller would be the waiter. Some of the tools that I use include ng-log. In order to develop on Slack, you will need to have a server that is on in order to initiate requests and receive requests. So I use nglog to develop locally. I also use the Postman tool for testing API endpoints. It's very useful to do a double check on the output formatting when I was doing the refactoring of key services and had to write unit tests. So user testing is an iterative process. Before I started on the project, we collaborated with the IT to understand their needs for Jumpcloud, what Jumpcloud functions we needed, and then we programmed the functions in the Slack bot accordingly. Then, when we talked with our team leads regarding the progress of the bot, he suggested to use Slack mentions, which come pre-built with autocomplete, which is the admin, rather than using Jumpcloud email as parameters. So this saves our IT folks the need to go and double check on what the user's emails are, and it improves usability. We also standardize the command syntax for our documentation. So some of the key takeaways that I have for the internship would be that product development is always about iterating and improving a product. So shortly after version 1 was released for use, we received more suggestions that more functions could be included for our Slack bot. So we added those functions in version 2. I also had a great mentorship experience for the time that I spent in funding societies under my supervisor, Ukash. And we had coding sessions where he would teach me stuff about tooling and Git and best coding practices. And my engineering manager, Fajar, also helped me to explore other areas that I was interested in, like about threat modeling for third-party vendors, which was very interesting to me. So having a good mentor is very important. So if you're able to assess for cultural fit or meet the team during your internship interview, do take the chance to do so. And as the picture says, having a good mentor is very important. So when I was nearing the end of my internship, I had a failed Git merge with, and I was about to lose 1,200 plus lines of code. But my mentor helped me save my code. And it's very important to learn from your mistakes and learn how to correct them. So when the next time you meet the same problem, you are able to overcome them. So a good thing about this project is that it is open source. So if your organization uses Jumpcloud and Slack, you can help yourself to the code at this GitHub link for funding societies. My supervisor, Ukash, also wrote a Medium article for this project, and you can check out the link below and give him some big kudos for this well-written article. There are also some of the interesting articles that funding societies has written, and I've included the Medium link so you can check it out there too. I've come to the end of my presentation, and thanks guys for attending.
Okay, thanks Shiying for that very interesting presentations. Looking at the live chat, there aren't any questions for Shiying right now. So what we'll be doing is we'll just move on to the last presentation by Chester. Right, so let me just switch the speakers. By the way, Chester, you are on mute, so you need to unmute.
Oh, sorry about that. Hi, everyone. So I'm Chester. I'm from SUTD, and today I'll be talking about this very cool piece of technology that I picked up from my internship experience, and I'm here to share it with you to learn more about this technology. It's called Ansible, and I'll also be showing you about some examples on how you can use it on the Google Cloud platform for your own projects. So where did this come from? As a sysadmin or the infrastructure guy in your team, you might have run into this problem before. You have a lot of servers, and then you need to update every one of them. And you need to manually SSH into each server, and then you upgrade the packages. Then you have 100 servers, you need to do it 100 times. Or sometimes you need provisioning or setup scripts to install all the software you need, or like configure the hosts, such as setting up firewall rules or creating users and groups. But then your scripts start to get very long and very hard to manage. And then if you have you're managing multiple hosts, right? And then if you have many hosts in your corporate infrastructure, and then you're creating you need to create like what each host you have, you create an entry in your SSH configuration file, and it gets very long and hard to manage. So if you have faced these problems before, I'm here to introduce to you this technology called Ansible. Ansible is an IT automation framework that can handle a lot of things. It can do host configuration, and it can also spin up new infrastructure, like creating new VMs on GCP. So essentially, if I were to sum it up in one line, right, it's shell scripts, but modern. What makes it modern is that it can automatically run on multiple hosts at the same time from like this like mothership control node used to like target multiple computers at the same time. And the other powerful part about it is that it's idempotent, so that if you run the Ansible script twice, right, it actually won't change the state, because Ansible can detect that you have already provisioned the server, and if you try to run the same provisioning script, right, nothing will change. So it makes it like more error-free, so that you don't break stuff by running it twice, for example. Your Ansible scripts are also written in YAML, so it's very easy to read. And if you ever need to extend it for your own users, right, the modules are actually written in Python. So it's very easy to use. So this is what Ansible looks like. If you were to use it to replace your shell scripts, right, to do your provisioning scripts or your server management scripts, your shell commands are now written in YAML. So each Ansible module, it actually maps to a shell command or program like yum or apt or some kind of operation. So there's a module in Ansible called file that can handle file copies, file linkings, deleting files, moving files, symlinks, and all that. So on the right, you can see here what it does in these few lines. I'm running two tasks in this Ansible script. It installs Apache HTTPD, and it starts the service. So I don't know about you, but this is a lot easier to read than a shell script. And another useful feature of Ansible is the idempotency. So the modules, right, they are not just they don't just blindly map to shell scripts or shell commands. They are actually like modules in Python that will actually check the state of the system first before they try to do anything. So for example, right, if you try to mount a drive, like you want to mount a device to a certain mount point, right? If you run this shell command twice, like 2 times in a row by accident, you'll result in an error. And then if this is one command in your very, very long shell script, right? If this fails, your entire script fails. Then you end up with your system is now in a broken state. However, right, if you use Ansible to mount, the module actually checks first if the drive is already mounted, and it skips if it's necessary. And it does it without you writing the if-else. So what it looks like, if I were to write a shell script that like mounts a device, if I want it to be safe and like idempotent, I need to first check if the device is already mounted at some place. And so it's something like if else. So it's like if it's already mounted, if it's not mounted, actually mount it. And this is very hard for me to read. So I am not like an expert in like shell scripts. I need to check like how do you mount, how do you like check if a drive is mounted. And then the if else syntax is not very clean in bash. And then you also need to go and search like, oh, I forgot how to write if else in shell. Then you realize that this if else syntax, right, does not work for L shell, all the shell variants. There's the bash, there's the original shell, and there's the ZSH and all that have different if else syntax sometimes. Whereas with Ansible, right, it takes a more declarative approach. You just tell Ansible what is the state of the system that you want to achieve. So I want to say that if I run this script, right, I want a drive at this device to be mounted at this point. That's it. So if it's already mounted, right, Ansible will do nothing because it's already mounted. Your state is already what you want. And this also automatically adds to like the fstab file without you doing weird things like echoing to the file and all that. So this is one very clear advantage of Ansible, where first the syntax is a lot more clean and expressive due to its declarative paradigm, and it's also idempotent, so that it's more resilient from recovering from a failed state, or you don't accidentally break your systems or leave them in a broken state because you run some parts twice. Another very cool thing about Ansible is the host inventory. So if you have your target from your own target host, right, like your control node, like your laptop, you can actually run the same Ansible script, or we call them playbooks, right, to target multiple hosts at the same time without opening the SSH sessions yourself. So what this means is that you can have like 100 VM instances in your Google Cloud project, and without you defining the IP address for the public IP address for each instance, right, you can actually tell Ansible to dynamically look up how to connect to these instances, and it does so by lookup plugins. So, for example, there are GCP plugins that can hook into Ansible to tell you things like oh, return me all the instances in this project, or return me all instances with this tag. So you can say things like, oh, I want to do apt get upgrade on all the database servers, and your database servers only the database servers have a certain tag. So Ansible can actually just detect, like dynamically build this inventory of hosts, so that you can target multiple hosts without knowing the exact number of hosts and without knowing what is their exact IP address. So all of this is automatic, which will save you a lot of time. So what are some practical use cases of host configuration tool like Ansible? So let's see how we can actually use it on GCP. So we might know that on GCP, right, if you want to run like a web server, right, that receives a lot of web traffic, you can actually create like an instance group that scales the number of VMs in this group. So if you have more traffic that comes in, then it spins up more VMs to handle the traffic, to distribute the traffic among these instances. But the thing is, when you spin up all Google can do for you, right, when inside the instance group, right, is just start the VM. But actually installing Flask and like starting the Flask application, right, you still need to handle that yourself. So the provisioning in a web application, right, the provisioning process might look something like this. You want to first update all your software packages. You want to install Python, a certain version of Python. You want to git clone your project. You install your project's dependencies, and then you start the application server. So instead of writing one giant shell script, right, you could do something like this. You translate it into Ansible modules. So this is what it looks like to apt get upgrade. You install Python. You clone the project. You install the project's pip dependencies. So like this is actually quite advanced. You can actually install it to a virtual environment and all that. And finally, you start the app server. So now you have this Ansible script instead of a shell script. It's you just need to run it on start. So the thing is, why we want to put a layer of abstraction between like the server setup script and this startup script that GCP gives you. So in GCP, right, if you define a startup script here, right, all your VMs will automatically run this when the VM is created. But with Ansible, right, what you can do instead is this startup script in GCP is the same for all your instances, but the contents of the playbook, the Ansible script, is different depending on like what role your server is serving. So now all your VMs, right, created from the Autoscaling instance group will automatically be up and running with the software that you need. So how does Ansible tie in with best practices? Inside the IOC, or infrastructure as code paradigm, right, or inside, if you're using the IaaS, right, infrastructure as a service, the host operating system that your application runs on, right, is now actually part of your application code and should be treated as such. So for example, if your application runs on a specific version of Python, then the fact that it runs on this specific version of Python needs to be versioned together with your code, like inside your GitHub repository. So your GitHub repository should contain things like, oh, what are the apt packages that are needed to run my application? So once you have the Ansible playbook, it's just a YAML file. You chuck the YAML file inside your Git repository, and there, your infrastructure is now versioned. And having this automatic provisioning process whenever your server starts up, right, it also ties in with this other ideology in DevOps of cattle. It's called cattle, not pets. So what it means is that you see your servers, right, as replaceable and disposable. It's like they are cattle. You can just like kill them and breed them again, and not pets. So if you are able to like make this setup process very consistent and reproducible, then your VMs are now like very easily replaced in an instance group. And inside instance group, right, if you want your application to be scalable, they need to be created and destroyed consistently and easily. So some other uses of Ansible is that Ansible can be used for a bit more complicated host configuration steps, where again consistency is important. So every time you run it, it produces the same output, even if the state is slightly different. So you can use it to do things like you set up firewall rules and you mount devices. It's also great for managing like the state of monolith servers that are running multiple services on the same VM. So sometimes you're just the infrastructure guy, you're not the developer. So your dev team actually gives you an application, but it's designed to run as a monolith. So there's nothing you can do but like you can't tell them to use Docker because you're not the one who built the application. So what you can do instead is to make your own life managing the monoliths a bit easier. It also runs great for both like on-premise VM clusters or even bare metal instances. So it doesn't just work on the cloud. It works for pretty much any Linux host, or I think it might even work on Windows host. So this is just my experience, but like legacy applications, it is also quite useful if you're deploying like legacy applications or enterprise environments where they demand a VM instead of containerizing applications into microservices. So when I tell my friends about Ansible, like, hey, you can use it to automatically install the software on your host and manage the state of the operating system, then they always shoot back with this question: why not use Docker? So to me, Ansible and Docker are quite different things. I see Ansible as a way for you to it's like automated host configuration. Docker is more of containerizing apps. But you see, like as a developer or as an engineer, you need to choose the right tool for the right job. So if the only automation you need, right, is like actually like installing libraries and starting services, and less of like at runtime host level changes like swapping drives on the go, right, you should consider containerizing your apps instead. And this is quite relevant to the discussion of when you are moving your apps to the cloud. Do you want a platform as a service like App Engine, or do you want a infrastructure as a service, like you actually have full control over the VM? And then again, as for the previous point, Ansible is a bit more flexible than Docker. You can actually use Ansible inside Docker, but other than that, Ansible can target. It is a bit more agnostic in the sense that it can target both VMs in any cloud provider, not just GCP, or it can target your regular VMs that is running on your on-premise site. So actually, that's all I have to say for today. I hope that I convinced you that Ansible is a very cool tool. And yeah, I encourage you to try, and if you are working in the infrastructure role where we're looking to automate some of your provisioning steps or your setup scripts, right, or managing state, try using Ansible, and you can see that it might actually make your life easier. So thanks for listening to my presentation. I'm Chester again, and this is my LinkedIn if you ever need to contact me for whatever reason. So yes, thank you.
Okay, thanks Chester for that wonderful presentation. Right, so I guess same as just now, we don't really have any questions in the live chat. Right, so I guess thank you everyone for attending this short sharing session. Right, thanks for giving us an opportunity to share the awesome work that's being done by SUTD students. Yeah, so thank you everyone for joining us today. Yeah, we'll be ending the session now. Right, so thanks everyone.